When it comes to F1 what-if stories, for me, the most intriguing one is Robert Kubica. He was a driver who was regarded by his peers. Hamilton and Alonso are on record as saying he's the best driver they've ever encountered. So, in this video, I'm going to go into what made Kubica such a special talent, and, without his accident, did he realistically have a shot at becoming a world champion? Let's go from the beginning. Kubica found himself as a BMW Sauber full-time race driver halfway through 2006 as a replacement for Jacques Villeneuve, who'd fallen out with manager and was underperforming compared to what was expected of him. So, Kubica was promoted from his previous role of Friday test driver and reserve driver. It's worth noting that he was in competition with Sebastian Vettel for the role. Vettel and Kubica were both BMW junior reserve drivers at the time, and Kubica was promoted ahead of Seb, who took on the role of Friday reserve that Kubica left behind. According to BMW themselves, Kubica was the quicker driver. Okay, he may have had a couple of years extra on Seb and a few more years of experience, but knowing now that Seb went on to become a 4 times world champion, the fact that Kubica was comparable, if not quicker than Seb when they were both juniors, says enough about his talent. A very telling bit of information comes from F1 journalist Mark Hughes, who wrote he believes Kubica's 2006 half season was his most impressive of all. On the high grip Michelin tyres the team was contracted to, he was able to take outrageous momentum into corners, overlapping the braking and corner entry phases probably better than anyone else at the time. And now this is the second half of 2006, which contained a field of prime Michael Schumacher, prime Fernando Alonso, prime Kimi Raikkonen, and Kubica is being compared to those guys and saying that by eye he was taking the braking and corner entry phases better than them. So Kubica, as a rookie, was being compared to the very best drivers on the field. As far as results go, on track, he managed to get a podium at the 2006 Italian Grand Prix. As far as the on-track performance goes, he clearly showed what he could do. So, if his 2006 was so impressive, what happened in 2007? Why was his 2007 not an improvement on 2006? Well, the simple answer for that is Bridgestone. Bridgestone became the sole tyre manufacturer in 2007, which meant Kubica, who was previously driving on Michelins and did all his testing on Michelins as well, was forced to change his driving style to adapt to the new Bridgestones. There were some brilliant performances. The Chinese Grand Prix at the end of the season was a very good performance until his engine gave up. But all in all, Heidfeld did have his measure in 2007, and it seemed like a bit of a regression compared to what we saw in 2006. This all leads to 2008. By 2008, Kubica had finally found a way to make the Bridgestone tyres work with his driving style, and he was unbelievable. He completely overturned the head-to-head against Heidfeld. He completely blew him out of the water. On average, was about 3/10 quicker, compared to being roughly a tenth and a half slower the previous season. BMW had started the season very strong. They'd put out a very competitive car that could challenge at the front consistently, and as a result, by the Canadian Grand Prix, Kubica took his only race victory, scoring a 1-2 finish for BMW in the process. At the end of that race, Kubica was leading the World Championship. So what went wrong? Why was he unable to sustain that all season? And the answer comes from BMW themselves. BMW Sauber decided to shift focus to the 2009 regs overhaul, and as a result, they conceded their title chances in 2008. This, however, proved to be the wrong decision because BMW did not produce a competitive car for the 2009 season. They couldn't consistently challenge at the front, and by the end of the year ended up pulling out of F1 altogether. Kubica did still have some highlights. He was in contention for the win in the Australian Grand Prix, but had a collision with Vettel at the end, and he also got a very, very impressive podium at the Brazilian Grand Prix. However, looking at the overall season, it was definitely a disappointment. The car was overweight, which also meant Kubica was at a disadvantage to his teammate Heidfeld, who was a lot lighter and had more freedom with using ballast with his car, and he could also use the KERS system when Kubica couldn't. With BMW pulling out of F1 at the end of 2009, that left Kubica with no choice other than to leave the team. He joined Renault for 2010, who had a vacancy after Alonso was moving to Ferrari, and Kubica did not disappoint. 2010 was his best season in the sport, and despite Renault not delivering a consistent front-running car, Robert still showed what he could do on numerous occasions. Kubica was able to work his magic at 3 races in particular where the driver can really make a difference: Monaco, Spa and Suzuka. At the Monaco Grand Prix, he managed to end up on the podium, despite having a car that had nowhere near as much grip, nowhere near as much downforce as a Red Bull, Ferrari or a McLaren. He repeated that at Spa, getting another podium at a downforce-dependent circuit. Despite driving a Renault, he was able to beat the likes of Vettel, Alonso. He was running ahead of Webber for the majority of the race until he ran long at his pit stop. And finally, Suzuka. For me, this was my personal highlight of Kubica in 2010. His qualifying lap that put him P4 on the grid, promoted to P3 after Hamilton's grid penalty, was sensational. That qualifying lap left Kubica himself speechless. The team's chief race engineer at the time, Alan Permain, recalled, "He's never seen a driver give that much in a lap. That was him. He's totally committed in a way most other drivers wouldn't even understand." And for me, that sums up Robert Kubica. He was a driver who was able to transcend the level of the car, and there are not many drivers like that in the history of F1. Off the back of his superb 2010, Ferrari signed him on a pre-contract agreement for 2013. What could have been had he not had that tragic rally accident at the start of 2011? We could have seen Robert Kubica and Fernando Alonso as teammates in a Ferrari, fighting for wins, fighting for podiums, but the racing gods had other ideas. It will always remain a mystery on what would have happened to Robert Kubica without that injury. Could he have gone on and developed Ferrari into a winning team? Could he have won the title himself in 2012 or 2013 if he was there? Unfortunately, we'll never know the answer. Some people may look at Kubica's comeback as a failure. He was completely destroyed by George Russell in qualifying, and despite a one-off points result in Germany, was quite lackluster. However, for me, it speaks volumes about the talent the man had. To end up back in an F1 seat with the nature of his injuries was incredible. It's a testament to the man's desire, the man's speed, the man's talent behind the wheel. The circumstances of his injury came while he was doing another racing discipline. He was challenging himself in another way to get better, to improve. But unfortunately, everything was taken away from him in such a tragic manner. Even if he didn't join Ferrari for 2012 or 2013, the Lotus was a very competitive car. I mean, Raikkonen won a race on his comeback season in 2012 and he won the opening race of 2013. So, who knows, maybe a Kubica who was at the peak of his powers, embedded into the team, could have gone a step further, won a few more races and maybe challenged for the title in a Lotus. But for me, it is clear that the talent this man had was next level. There's a reason why Alonso, Hamilton describe him as the best driver they've raced against, and his career, what he's shown in the car, proves that. Let me know what you think of Robert Kubica. Could he have become a world champion if he didn't have the injury? Let me know in the comments, and do make sure to subscribe to the channel for more analysis on different drivers, seasons, analysing data. If you're into all of that stuff, then you're in the right place. Do drop a subscription. Also, check out my other social media channels linked above.